Hi everyone, welcome to this tutorial. Today I'm gonna walk you through how you can set up Jest in React Testing Library to test your React application. To do this, I created a simple project which is a sign-in form where you can input your email and your password, and you can see that it has some behavior we can test. So we are going to use this as an exercise. We're going to write some tests for this at the end of this video. First, we're going to get started by setting up the project and doing some configurations. I ensured that this is an updated tutorial, so I'm using all the latest packages as of 2023. I hope you enjoy it, and let's get started. So we start by installing Jest in our project. This is a development dependency because you don't need it. You don't need it in your production bundle. Just really for development. So we installed Jest. Jest can actually be used for both front-end and back-end projects. So you could also use Jest for testing API routes or simple functions. You just import a backend function and you test its behavior. Because we are going to use Jest for React components, we also need to install a second library, which is Jest environment JS DOM. This will allow us to write JSX in our tests, because otherwise you won't be able to write any. So we're going to add that to our project. And then we also, because we are using TypeScript, we also want to be able to write our tests in TypeScript, which is really useful because then you also get autocomplete and you can see whenever you're making any mistakes. So in order to do that, we need to install two packages. The first one is Jest, which is like a preset for Jest that contains some basic configuration for us to use it. So we're going to add that, and then you also need some types for Jest. So we're going to add that. Okay, so these are the basic packages that we need to get started. We'll also install testing library later, but let's start with this one, with these ones. And what we are missing right now after installing is some configuration to glue all the packages together, so to speak. And to do this, you have some options. You can see here there are some options on how to configure. You can create a function that returns an object, or you can just create a JSON file. I always like to create a JSON file. I always feel like that's easier. So we can create our file here, our Jest configuration, and this configuration file is going to have our preset. So in this case, we are going to use the preset that's given to us by Jest, some basic configuration. So Jest, our test environment, because we need to tell Jest that we are going to actually write JSX. So our test environment is going to be JS DOM, test and environment JS DOM, and then we wanted to exit if there is any issues, and we want to see all the errors. So it's going to be verbose true. So afterwards, we also need to call a function that comes from the testing library that allows us to use Jest's expectations along with the testing library. So we need to do this. And I also forgot another package, which is the testing library Jest DOM, which is also serves the same purpose. So we can use Jest expectations with it. So we do yarn dev testing library Jest DOM. So the component I prepared for us today is a simple sign-in form. So you can see that it has required fields, and you can type in your details, and then it shows you this alert message that you are logged in. So very simple, but it's enough for us to do some simple tests as well. So let's get started. We have our sign-in component here. The details of the component don't matter much. I always think you should test your components as a black box. What really matters is the behavior. The implementation details don't really matter and shouldn't matter in your test, because what you actually want to guarantee is that your component behaves as you want it to behave, and that you can use your tests to test that behavior. So you can actually change completely the way you are solving your problems, the way you are coding your component, and just run the tests to have some reassurance that you didn't break anything. So I don't think it's useful for us to check the code actually, and I'm gonna give you some tools that can aid in testing your component without looking at the code. So you can create a file here called signin.test.tsx, and this is going to be our test file. You could also name it we could also name it .spec if you wanted. So that would be specification. It comes from a specification. So let me show you. This is also recognized. But I like to go with test. So you organize your test with describes. This is something that comes from Jest. Describes are a way for you to group your tests. So the top level one, I always name it after the component, because then you are going to run all your tests and you want to see to each component each test belongs to, and this really helps with that. So the first thing we could test maybe could be the sign-in title. So let's test that. So the sign-in component, it renders the sign-in title. Now you can see that I'm trying to write my test in the imperative form because things either work or they don't work. So it's really useful for you, like when you see your tests failing, like it renders the sign-in title. The test passes. It doesn't render the sign-in title. The test does not pass. So writing things clearly and concisely as possible, it can really help you. So then we are going to do a render. This render is going to come from the React testing library actually. So let's do that. And you're going to pass the component here, the component you want to test. So that's going to be our sign-in. Our sign-in doesn't have any properties, so we don't need to add anything. And let's see if this passes. So if you do yarn test, you can see that the test passes. But we are not asserting anything. So tests usually have 3 phases. There would be one here, which would be the preparation, which would include like any mocks you need to do for your test, any data that you need to build for your test. Then you have the execution, which would be like your rendering and any actions you want to perform. and then your assertions. We don't actually have any actions that we want to perform, just the rendering. That's going to be our execution. This test is very simple. And then for the last stage, we have our assertions, which is going to be, we expect that the title is there. So we are going to import screen also from the React testing library. And we basically want to know if the title is there. So we would use get by text, sign in, and then we expect this to be in the document. However, this test is not great. Why is this test not great? Because if you look here at this page, you can see that we actually have two things called sign in. We have the title and we have the button. So what React testing library is going to tell us, hey, like, I see that you want to know if the sign in is in the document, but I actually have two sign in texts in the document. So I don't really know which one you want to test. So I'm going to fail your test because it's not good enough. Yeah, it found two. You could do get all, so you could get all the texts and then assert those, but actually our test just cares about the sign-in title. So I'm gonna take the opportunity to show you a cool thing, which is this thing here, which is super useful. So this is gonna give us an URL which we can access, and here you can here you get the, without any CSS, you get your form, you see, the component that we have, and it's gonna tell you which getters you should use to assert these things. And it actually can give us more specific, because the more specific you are, the better. It's gonna give you a more specific matcher for the title. Because it knows it's an heading. So we can use this. Expect. And then it won't be confused because there are actually just one title to be in the document. And with this more specific query, we were able to pass the test, which is really good. So let's look at our component. There's something else that we can do. We can check that this error message shows. And let's do just that one more test, because I also don't want this tutorial to get very big. And then we can do other tests on other future tutorials. So let's start with that one. So we want to check that the error message is shown, and it happens after we select the field. So we are going to do a describe that is basically gonna describe us under which conditions this behavior happens. So I always like to use when. So when the email field is selected or focused, and then there is a second condition, which is the user doesn't input any value. And the user does not fill their email. And you're gonna see something very cool about using these describes in a bit. It displays this field is required message. Which is Jest is gonna concatenate these messages for you, which is really cool. So let's see that in action. Oh, it's already here. So you can see that when the email field is focused and the user does not fill their email, it displays the this field is required message. Now what's really cool about this is that then if you have other stuff that happens under the same conditions, you can add more tests here. And they're all gonna show under the same condition. And then imagine, then it's easy, also really easy for you to think about, okay, what happens in the case that when this is not true, you know? So this really helps you structure your thinking around tests. So end user fills their email. It displays the email, which is cool. It's a cool test to have. So we can write these two tests. So let's start with the first one. We need a render, again, always. There's something I always like to do, which is knowing that the page is actually loaded, because in this case we are using Next.js, which is server-side rendering for us, but in some cases you're going to have client-side components, and they might take a bit to load. And I think it's always a good practice to wait for the page to be loaded first before testing anything in your components. It can save you a lot of bugs. So, and the way you do that is not just because the get just assumes that the text is gonna be there. So what you can do is use a find, which returns a promise, which you can then await. So you can do find by role, and you know that the title is always gonna be in the page. So you can use this element to know, okay, the page is loaded once I see the title. So what I would recommend that you do is that you turn these tests into asynchronous tests, and then always wait for the page to be loaded first. Always. In this case, we are kind of testing the same thing, but that's not gonna always be the case. So it's good practice for you to await these things. Wait for the page to be loaded. So we're gonna wait for the page to be loaded before we do any assertions on the form. Always a good practice. So we want to do two things. We want to focus on the email field, and this is where the fun begins. If you've seen tests in the past using React, you might know that the fire event used to be very used. Nowadays, we really use userEvent, which is a library on top of the testing library. So that's what we are going to use. So to focus on, we are going to use it to focus on the email field and trigger this message. So, but first we need to configure it, and to configure it, we can go here to the testing library. And this user event actually needs to be set up first before our test run. And you might wonder, okay, but where am I going to do that? Because we need to call this for every time we use the user event to click on fields or to click on buttons, whatever user action you want to do. So where we are going to place this is we are actually going to stop, and this is the way that I found that works best for projects, is that we're going to stop using these functions from the testing library. We're actually going to create a file that can be called testutils. So I would recommend that you, in your project, maybe you already have like a utils folder. I don't have one yet, so I'm going to create one. And inside I'm going to create a testutils file. And it's TSX because it's actually going to have some JSX in there. So you start by we start by exporting every function that we have from the testing library. So what you can actually do now is, instead of importing these files from the testing library, we can start importing them from the test utils. So we can do this. Test utils. So this runs exactly the same. So we are going to start by installing the userEvent library. So we can do this by doing yarn at dev userEvent. Then you also want to install the types for this package, yarn dev. Types. So now what we want to do is write a custom render function that is going to replace the one we use from React testing library that setups the user event like they suggest in the documentation. So we can start by creating our render function, and this is gonna have a similar structure to the one exported by React testing library. So we will have a UI, and our UI will be our component. So this will be a JSX element. Then as a second option, we are going to receive the render options from React testing library. So we can have our render options, and this is going to be optional because sometimes you won't need to pass them all the time. I'm going to have render options, and the render options come from React testing library. So we can import here, import render options from our testing library. Like this. So this is all typed, which is really nice because then when you go write your test, you can have autocomplete on everything. And the second one is going to be user event options. So this is going to be for the user event package. So this is like you can add a delay for like when the user is typing. And you have some other options that you can set up. We can look at them in a bit. Unfortunately, the user event library doesn't export this type yet. There is an issue open, so I really hope that they fix this soon. This comes from user event dot setup. It does exist. I think I installed the type, so I probably need to refresh my window. Oh, this is wrong, sorry. It's not this user event, it's from the testing library. So now that we have the argument set up, it's just a matter of returning our object. So our render will return everything from the normal, because we are overriding the render from the React testing library. So we're gonna have our render from React testing library. So RTL React testing library render. So we can destructure it here, and then like they recommend that we do this every time. So this is explained here in this documentation. Basically, you want to set up the user event every time you write a test. What the user event is going to do is it's going to replace all the methods and events that are default to the DOM, like typing and clicking. It will stop some of them. One of the examples they give here in the documentation is like the copy to clipboard, which is going to be stubbed. For instance, like if you have an event that copies stuff to the clipboard, it's going to replace that. Same for typing and clicking, and you want to do that on every test. So then the user that you use in each test, it's going to be a different instance. So it's more clean. Basically, you keep your tests separate because you're not using the same instance of user. So what you want to do is what they say in the documentation. You want to set it up every time. And here is where your options from the user event come into play. Not the type, we want the value. And here we also want to pass the UI, and we want to pass the render options. Yeah, cool. So I think this is it. In a real project, we'll probably also have a wrapper, but I'm not gonna do it now. But usually, you will want to have in your custom render a wrapper as well. So you could eventually, here in the render options, you could have a wrapper, and then imagine you have like, let me think, imagine you are using useQuery or something similar. You could so this, wait 1 second, so this, I think, yeah, this receives a function with like children inside children. This needs to be constructed here. Like if you had a provider, like, I don't know, like you see this example here, React took form. Like if you had a form provider that you always needed to pass in every test, or if you had a translations provider, you could also do it here, which is really, really cool. So you don't have to do it in every test. We are not doing that today because we don't have to. So you can just pass the render options for now. I might do another video on that though, because it's really cool and useful. So we have our render, we are already using it. So now we can actually, it was already here, we can actually test our components, see if everything is still working. It is working. So what did we want to test? We wanted to test if the error message, this field is required, is displayed. And for that we need to click on the message, remember? So if we go here, like if we click outside, we need to click on the field. And for that we need the focus function. So let's see how we can do that. As always, I like to use the log testing playground URL utility function. So this one. And I don't think I've shown you this yet. If you want to run just one test, you can put an F in front of it. The F means focus, so it will focus just on this test. We'll run just this test, you see, it skipped the other ones. So we want to click here, right? So we can copy this. I can do a screen dot maybe let's save this into a field, email field. Then we can do screen dot. Oops, the screen was already there. We have the field and now we want to click on it. So for this, remember we set up the user on the render function. So we have our user here. Yeah, the user is here. And remember, second option are the React testing library options. So I think this has like a timeout, probably, right? Or not? I want to show you the options. There are some options that you can do. This is always cool. It's just a container, base element, legacy root. Okay, that was probably in the past. Probably you can no longer configure the timeout. Yeah, I don't think you can configure the timeout here anymore. But you still have access to the options, which is really cool. But the second one is the user events. So you can not pass anything here. And this one I think has a delay. Exactly. So you get autocomplete because we used the TypeScript. So that's really cool. So if you want to set up options for your user when he's typing or clicking on anything, you can do that. So I think we are gonna, I'm not sure if maybe clicking, we should do exactly the thing that the user is doing on the page. So let's go with clicking. Let's see if this works. So if we click, this is no longer, no, this is still awaitable. So we do need to await for this. It's an asynchronous option. And it's not gonna be immediate. So I don't think we'll see it already here. I think we'll need to wait a bit after we click on the field in order for actually to see the error. Because if you go here and if you simulate this, like you click on it, you click outside, and it takes a while for it to show up, you know? So I don't think it will be immediate, but let's see what happens. Yeah, you see it's no longer there. But if we click outside, let's see. Let's maybe write in the password field, you know? That seems like a nice test. So you click on the first one, you don't do anything, and then you fill in the other one. Right, user dot type. So typing on the field, I think it first receives this is cool. Password 123. Let's see if it now shows up on the other one. Oh, I typed in the pass. This was a mistake. Yeah, this is no longer email. This is the password field. Interesting. Okay, how can I select the other one then? Get by label text, and this was get text box, so they are implemented differently. All right. Actually, by label text is better because it ensures your form is accessible. Not sure why this is not implemented with that as well. Did they also suggest it? Yeah, you could also use label text for that one. So I think this would work better. So this ensures all your fields have a label associated with it, which is really nice. So let's see if this, yeah, it still passes the test. Okay, it filled in the password, but you see the other one is still not showing up. Maybe clicking is not enough. There is something I usually do because I don't know what to await for yet. So I always have a little trick to aid me when writing the tests. I never leave it here, but I have this as a, like this will just await a little bit of time in your test. And I use this as kind of a trick for me to see, okay, is this something that's taking a long time, or do I need to do something else that's with a big time? This will probably not wait that long because there are also, yeah, you see, there is an act warning. I'm not gonna go very deep into act warnings yet. But this basically means there is something happening in your test that you are not testing yet. So it's probably it's probably what we need to wait for, which is the is required fields text. So let's see. So if we do await screen and text. Let's see if this is here. Haha, you see? So this is what we were waiting for. You see here in the previous version it was not there yet. So, lesson here. Act warnings always mean that there is something happening in your test that you are not testing yet. Which is, in this case, exactly what we were trying to cause, which was the required field to show up. Now I'm curious to see, because like if I go here, the way this is implemented is I click on it and I click outside and then it shows up. My doubt here is if it's enough for us, like if we need to click outside for it to show up, or is if it's enough for us to just focus on it. Just click on it and it will show up. So I'm gonna remove the second part where we write down the password and see if this still passes. It does not. So we do need to click outside. We do need to click outside. Yeah, but I think like clicking on a password is like filling in the password is a nice test, because then you also can see like it's the email field that is required, and we can actually test that the password is required field is not there. So you can get screen and this is also very important, and also part of the reason why we are doing this is if you want to check if something is not on the screen, use the query my text. This is because the get will art fail on you if it's not there, but the query is prepared for the element to not be there. So no, this autocomplete. It's my issue. I forgot to write the expectation. Expect not to be in think this is gonna work. Yes, perfect. So we have our test. First, we render the component. Second, we check the page is loaded. This is because we might be client-side rendering. We get the email field. We click on it. I would probably do something like this now that we have finished writing our test. You can just do this. And same thing for the password field. You can just do this. So you select the email field, you write down your password, and then you see, hey, you didn't fill in your email, so it's required. And you can check the password is required. Now, in the end, this is a matter of taste. But sometimes when something, like when you need to wait for something, it's not just this thing that happens. Like in this case, like this is happening, but this is also, this icon is also showing up. This is also turning red. So the thing you necessarily await, I think you should always like have a second expectation. This is a matter of test. You don't need to do this. There are a bunch of people that don't do this. But because it can be a set of things that happen afterwards, it's good to have this here repeated. So first you await for the thing to happen, and then you actually assert all the elements are there and not there. So you have preparation of the well, this is not really preparation anymore, right? This is already execution. So you have execution and then execution. Well, execution would be all of this. And then you have the assertion that the behavior is correct in your test. So we wrote our first test, which is really nice. So for our second test, we want to check that the email is filled in when the user fills it in. So I have an error here. So the first thing we need to do is render our component again. So we're going to do the render function again. And we can leave the user there already because we are going to need it. We are going to check that the page is loaded again. This makes it an async test. And the first thing we need to do is actually type in the email in the box. So we call the user, we do type, and the first argument that type receives is the place where you're writing. So in this case, we are writing in the email box, the input field. And the second argument is going to be the text that you're writing. So that's going to be my email. So now, because this is an input value, it's not actually going to be displayed as a text. So we actually need to rely on expectations to check this. And for that, we have a utility function called wait for. I think it's already imported. Exactly, it comes from the utils. And then you can pass an expectation that will be retried until it succeeds. So it can actually take a little bit of time for it to succeed, but once it does, your test will pass. And then it's a value. It's not going to be in plain text in your page. So you need to check the value. These are all things like you need to check the documentation to learn what to use in each case. So let's see if this passes. It passed. So now let's try to make our test fail just to see if it's actually working. Sometimes it's not exactly. So our test works. And that was it. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and learned a lot today. And I'll see you next time. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave them down below.